people are romantics. They take pleasure in high art. And so all their furniture, their vehicles, their costuming, whatever, reflect that. It really pushed the envelope for us. I mean, we were designing spaceships with these really elegant tails that really serve no function, but they look beautiful.
I feel it also.
Don't let them send any transmissions.
One of the things we did with Jar Jar, of course, was to create a series of different walks.
After this, I'll get my dinner ready.
You have to remember, when you're animating a character that just exists in the computer, you need to get into the head of the character. And I knew, of course, that Jar Jar was from a water planet. He'd never been to a desert planet before. So you put in things like he's squinting because of the sun, his feet are hot. And so you change the attitude of his walk, and the audience picks it up subconsciously that Jar Jar's in a different kind of a space. He's walking with shorter steps. Imagine if you're at the beach with hot sand on your feet, you walk in a much different way than if you're walking in a nice, cool forest.
Moisture farms, for the most part. Some indigenous tribes.
This is the longest character shot in the movie. We've got Jar Jar, but we've also got the bantha in the background. And as we pan across, you'll see a group of rats, Tyrell characters, all standing back there. Some of them actually have cameras in their hands, pretended that they were a little group coming into town to watch the race the next day. There's a little rolling droid that's going to come in the bottom of the screen left. It's also in there, and there's also a speeder added in. I believe that yellow speeder was added in.
This is a really, really great shot. We shot this on a crane, but we only built the buildings about the same height as Liam was. So the domes and everything that you see behind them right now are all painted in. We have a huge painting that extends the set into the far background, but we've added clever use of miniatures in the foreground pieces. It uses every single technique known to filmmakers.
Naran Watto's, and Watto was one of our favorite characters to animate. It's just such a great design, and we did torture us sort of over how could he fly with that big belly, but once we bought into it, I think he's one of the most successful characters that we animated in the movie. A lot of what I do before we began animation was to sit with George for hours and ask him probably thousands of questions. Things like, is Watto from Tatooine? Because if he is from Tatooine, then he's used to the heat. You imagine if he isn't from Tatooine, he might be wiping his brow all the time because he'd be perspiring. Has he ever seen a Jedi before? Well, clearly he has seen a Jedi before because of what he says in the dialogue, but we don't know that at the start. So there may be a little bit of attitude that he would have in his head or in his delivery of his line that would give us an indication of what kind of customer he is.
Traders and star pilots. I'm a pilot, you know, and someday I'm gonna fly away from this place. You're a pilot? Mm-hmm. All my life. When have you been here? Since I was very little.
This was a particularly difficult scene for Jake. He never liked it. He never wanted to do it. But it actually is the sequence that we used as the audition scene for all of the young actors that we used. So this is the one that we actually used to choose Jake in the first place.
Well, I understand this is a strange place to me. I think Tunisia was great, but once we went to Tatooine, the actual place Tatooine, if there's anything worse than just regular hot heat, humid heat. Hate it. There's nothing worse than that. But you kind of grow immune to it if you live there for over 200 years.
When we finally got back from shooting, this was the sequence that Rob Coleman, our animation director, had been working on so hard, and nothing was coming through. I mean, just the wings didn't work, the texture of Watto's skin, his beard, his clothing, nothing seemed to work for about 6 weeks. And then finally, Rob called us down and we came rushing into the screening room. He said, I think you'll be happy with this. And this was the first shot that we saw Watto come alive. And of course, it was just awesome.
What's in the background there, John?
It's a 2001 pod that Liam just walked in. The junkyard's been extended in the background of all these shots with matte paintings. Originally, there was a big stack of boxes right behind them that sort of formed a wall, but George felt that was a little too closed in, so we made it look like there was a vast junkyard back then.
This is really the first act of a 3-act play. This is the other trilogy works, and one of the parts of this first act is to set up the main plots. There's endless discussion and work on how floppy his ears would be and how much they would flow around. That's probably the most extreme, but I think they give him a lot of character to have him fly around like that.
I didn't realize that Watto was going to be sort of this sympathetic character at first. I mean, George had described him as a character, just kind of an odd-looking, shifty character. And that was the personality that I gave him in terms of designing his features. And it was only later, when the script was delivered, that George gave him all these layers of depth of sympathy and caring for Anakin.
Many of the CG characters in the picture have various little secondary animation simulation aspects to them.
You can see the interaction with clothing and his ears, which makes the characters in this movie, I think, more successful than our previous films, because you get that secondary motion of the fabric and his ears on his body that make it look like he's more real than what we were able to achieve before.
The actors in the film that had to speak Huttese were given some lessons, basically. I wrote the lines out, translating them from English from the script that George had written. And then I recorded my own voice saying the lines, and then sent an audio cassette to each one of the actors ahead of time so they could hear what the Huttese sounded like, and they could rehearse and get comfortable with it. So when they performed the scenes, they would have that sound in mind.
It's Hi. Your body here was about to be turned into orange goo. You picked a fight with done, especially dangerous.
There's little subtle things we do in animation too. Check out what happens with the wind on Liam. You'll see a little puff of wind hit Liam in the hair, and we actually match that in Jar Jar and actually have his ears reacting to the same wind puff as it goes. Subconsciously, you would not ever notice that, but you might notice if it wasn't there. So we do pay that kind of attention to scenes when we're animating.
That's pretty bad.
The little beep of Panaka's radio device on his belt is actually a sonic ray pistol from the 1950s. I owned one as a kid, and I loved the sound of that buzzer. And I used it in the original Star Wars.
I know, I'll be right there. I'll be right there to make my own.
In the Sandcrawler. And just couldn't help myself, but I used to find a place for it in each movie, and it was used in this case for the radio beeping of Panaka's communicator.
You never reach the outskirts of time. Sandstorms are very, very dangerous. Come on, I'll take you to my place.
This, in a way, is very similar in style to the original Homestead in the first film. We're back on Tatooine, and this relates to a type of architecture in Tunisia, sort of grain stores, Khazars. And in theory, the shape of these interiors are related directly to the exterior views of those for which we shot where we shot the exteriors in Tunisia. And obviously we couldn't do the interiors there. The size and space was just too restricting out there, especially on the sort of intimate scenes that took place. So it's very much in a style of a mixture of old style architecture and modern technology, as we've seen before in the Star Wars. And George is quite keen that this did have quite a sympathetic feel in terms of the other film, the original film when they were on Tatooine, because we are only 30, 40 years earlier, and presumably to give the audience that sort of familiarity of the two. And it is Anakin's home, so there's no reason why it shouldn't have that same feel.
Human-cycle relations. How might I serve you?
It's perfect. When the storm is over, I'll show you my razor. I'm building a pod razor.
To execute the scene, we had built a puppet of C-3PO, full size, as you see there, that could be attached to the front of a performer.
A pleasure to meet you. I am C.
We had decided that it made more sense to build him as a full-size puppet than as a computer graphic model, because, as you can see, it's really complicated. There's lots and lots of these thin little wires, and you can see deep down into the structure of him. So it would be a